I've always had a rather predictable life, or so I thought. Until the day I found that first letter. It was tucked beneath the stack of mail on the kitchen counter, a simple, white envelope, with no return address, no name. The handwriting was elegant, almost old-fashioned, and it immediately struck a chord of intrigue. I remember feeling a rush of excitement, a flutter in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. "Good morning, my dear," the letter began. "I hope this finds you well. I've been watching you for some time now, and I must confess that I am quite taken with you." I laughed softly, a bit nervously, thinking it was one of Jack's attempts to rekindle some romance. He was always the type to keep our relationship lively with surprises. But as I read on, the content of the letter began to unsettle me. The writer described details of my daily life, things only someone very close to me would know. They spoke of the way I liked my coffee, the way I hum a tune while doing chores. There was even a mention of the pearl earrings I wore to our anniversary dinner last month. I glanced over at Jack, who was reading the newspaper with his usual morning ritual. "Did you do something funny with the mail?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up, confused. "Funny? What do you mean?" "This letter," I said, holding it up. "Did you send it?" He frowned, shaking his head. "No, but it sounds like something I would do." "Why?" I brushed off his concern, assuming it was just a playful gesture. But as the days passed, more letters arrived. Each one grew more intimate, more detailed, and increasingly unsettling. The writer seemed to know me in ways I hadn't shared with anyone, not even Jack. The compliments were flattering but also invasive, like someone was peering into my very soul. There was a growing discomfort in me, a gnawing feeling that something was terribly wrong. I decided to be cautious and kept the letters hidden from Jack, not wanting to worry him unnecessarily. Each letter was signed with a single initial, M, which only deepened the mystery. One evening, as I read the latest letter in the dim light of my bedroom, my fingers trembled. The writer had mentioned an old photograph I had tucked away in a drawer, one of my late grandmother and me, smiling at a summer picnic. How could they have known about that? It was a secret, something I hadn't shown or mentioned to anyone for years. The letter ended with a chilling line, "Soon, I will reveal myself to you. Until then, think of me as a shadow in the corner of your mind." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The feeling of being watched grew more intense with each passing day. I wondered if Jack could sense my growing anxiety, though he never mentioned it. I was trapped in a web of secrets, and I felt like I was slowly losing control over my own life. Yes, I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. I tried to convince myself it was just a prank or an elaborate joke. But the nagging feeling of fear refused to leave me. I couldn't shake the thought of someone knowing so much about me, someone who might be closer to me than I ever imagined. The letters continued to arrive, each one a reminder of my growing paranoia. My daily routine had become a game of cat and mouse, where every interaction and every glance felt laced with hidden meanings. Jack remained oblivious to my secret torment, and I struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy. One evening, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, the scent of rosemary and garlic filling the air. Jack was flipping through the TV channels, his attention divided between the screen and his newspaper. I could hardly focus on the meal, my mind preoccupied with the latest letter, which described in vivid detail a conversation I had had with a friend over coffee, one that I hadn't shared with anyone but Jack. The phone rang, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was Sarah, my closest friend, and her voice was warm and comforting. "Hey, I just wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" "Sarah," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I'm doing fine. Just a little tired from work." "You don't sound fine," she said, her tone laced with concern. "You've been on edge lately. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, not wanting to burden her with my fears. "It's just some strange letters I've been getting. They're making me a bit anxious." "Letters?" Sarah's voice sharpened with curiosity. "What kind of letters?" I explained as much as I could without revealing too much. Sarah's reaction was immediate. "That sounds unsettling, Anna. Are you sure it's not just someone messing with you? Maybe you should talk to Jack about it." I didn't want to involve Jack just yet, fearing it might lead to unnecessary panic. But Sarah's words planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Could this really be just a prank? It seemed too calculated, too personal to be dismissed so easily. That night, I was unable to sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and fear. The more I thought about the letters, the more I questioned my own sanity. The details they contained were too precise to ignore, and the sense of being watched was becoming unbearable. The following morning, I decided to confront the letters head-on. I took them out of their hiding place and laid them out on the dining table, examining them carefully. I noticed a pattern, a specific way the writer formed their sentences, a peculiar choice of words. It was as if they were trying to communicate something deeper, something beyond the surface of their flattery. I resolved to find out more about the writer. The letters had to be from someone who knew me well or had been observing me closely. I needed to uncover their identity before the situation spiraled further out of control. I began to make a list of people who might have a motive or opportunity to send such letters. But as I stared at the list, I realized how limited my options were. The circle of people who knew me well enough to notice these personal details was small. The sense of dread grew stronger with each passing day. I was sinking deeper into a pool of anxiety, each letter further eroding my sense of security. The tension in my life was palpable, creeping into every conversation and interaction. Jack noticed, though he remained silent. His concerned glances were a constant reminder of the growing gulf between us, one that I was too afraid to bridge with the truth. One Saturday, Jack suggested we go out for a casual lunch. I agreed, hoping that a change of scenery might lift my spirits. We went to our favorite bistro downtown, a cozy place with a charming atmosphere. But even amid the clinking of cutlery and the hum of conversation, I found it hard to focus on anything other than the constant worry gnawing at my mind. As we sat at our table, Jack reached across and squeezed my hand. "Anna, you've been distant lately. Talk to me. What's going on?" His concern was genuine, but I hesitated. The letters had created a chasm of distrust and fear between us, and I wasn't sure how to bridge it. "It's nothing, really," I said, forcing a smile. "Just some personal stuff." Jack's expression didn't change, but his grip tightened slightly. "Whatever it is, we can face it together. You don't have to go through this alone." I nodded, appreciating his offer but unsure of how to explain something as bizarre as anonymous letters. Instead, I tried to focus on our meal, making an effort to enjoy the moment. But my mind kept drifting back to the letters, how they seemed to invade every corner of my life. That evening, after Jack had gone to bed, I decided to take another look at the letters. The latest one had been particularly unsettling. It detailed a private moment between me and my sister, a phone call we'd had where I'd mentioned a disagreement about our mother's estate. The letter had been almost voyeuristic in its precision. I took out my list of potential suspects again. Friends, acquaintances, colleagues, anyone who could have known about these personal details. The list seemed hopelessly incomplete. I felt like I was chasing shadows, trying to pin down something that was elusive and frighteningly close. As I reviewed the letters, one particular detail struck me. In the earlier letters, the handwriting had been slightly more formal, but in the recent ones, it had become almost frantic, with erratic flourishes and smudges. It was as if the writer was growing increasingly desperate or impatient. I knew I had to do something. I considered going to the police, but the letters themselves were not threatening, just unnervingly personal. They could be dismissed as mere pranks without any solid evidence. Still, the idea of confronting someone or reaching out for help seemed like a desperate measure. I needed to understand who was behind this before taking any drastic steps. The next few days felt like a series of endless, tense moments. I was constantly on edge, my nerves frayed by the anticipation of another letter. Each new one seemed to blur the line between my reality and a nightmarish fantasy. The writer's insights into my private life felt like a dark reflection of my own fears. One rainy afternoon, as I sat at my desk working from home, the mail arrived. I opened the latest envelope with trembling hands, my heart racing. The letter was different this time. It wasn't just filled with descriptions or flattery, it contained something tangible, a photograph. The photo was of me, taken from a distance. I was walking into a bookstore, dressed in a red coat, carrying a paper bag. The image was so recent it could have been taken just the day before. My stomach churned as I realized how close the writer must have been to capture that moment. The letter read, "I see you every day, Anna. I know your routines, your habits, your fears. Soon, you will know me." I felt a chill run through me. The photo wasn't just a threat, it was a clear indication that the writer was close, too close for comfort. The fear of being followed or watched constantly was suffocating. Determined to uncover the identity of my tormentor, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I began to pay close attention to my surroundings, looking for any signs of unusual behavior or strangers who seemed to be observing me. I even started taking different routes to work and varying my daily routine, hoping to throw off whoever was watching. One evening, while browsing through some documents in the living room, I noticed something odd. There was a faint smell of cologne lingering in the air. It was a scent I recognized, one that Jack used to wear. My heart skipped a beat. Could Jack somehow be involved in this? The idea was preposterous, but the scent was too distinct to ignore. Later that night, while Jack was in the shower, I searched through his things, looking for any sign that he might be connected to the letters. I found nothing, just his usual personal items and toiletries. The scent could have come from anywhere, but the connection to Jack's cologne was unsettling. The following day, I decided to confront Jack about my suspicions. We were having breakfast when I broached the subject. "Jack, I need to ask you something," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Have you noticed anything strange lately? Any reason why someone might be sending me these letters?" Jack looked up from his coffee, surprise etched on his face. "Letters? I thought we were past that. You haven't said anything in days." I took a deep breath. I didn't want to worry you. But these letters, they've become increasingly personal. I'm starting to think that someone might be following me. Jack's expression changed from confusion to concern. "Anna, I swear I have no idea what's going on. If you think someone is watching you, we need to get to the bottom of this. We should contact the authorities." I hesitated, but his genuine concern was reassuring. "I've been thinking about it, but I'm afraid it might be too soon. I want to understand more before taking any drastic steps." Jack nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "Whatever you need, I'm here. We'll figure this out together." I appreciated his support, but the nagging fear remained. If Jack wasn't involved, then who was? The sense of impending danger loomed larger with every passing day, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how frightening it might be. The days following my conversation with Jack felt like a blur. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the persistent fear and the sense of being watched were suffocating. I kept up my routine of being vigilant, but it was exhausting and left me feeling paranoid and overwhelmed. One evening, while sitting alone in the living room, I heard a soft knock on the door. My heart raced as I approached it, half expecting it to be another ominous letter. Instead, I found a package sitting on the doorstep. It was small, wrapped in plain brown paper with no indication of who might have sent it. I hesitated before bringing it inside, my anxiety mounting. I carefully unwrapped it to find another letter, this one different from the others. It was a detailed account of a memory, but not one I could easily place. The writer described a moment from my childhood, a birthday party with my closest friends, and a secret we had shared about a surprise for my mother. The letter was signed with the same M, but the tone was colder, more accusatory. It read, "Your past sins are catching up with you, Anna. You thought you could escape, but no one escapes the shadows." I was shaken. The reference to a long-forgotten childhood memory felt like a direct threat. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what it could mean. The mention of sins made me think of past mistakes or regrets, but I couldn't pinpoint anything that would warrant such a reaction. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The feeling of dread had intensified. I found myself recalling the details of my past, trying to identify any incident that might have angered someone. The more I thought, the more I realized that I had made mistakes, small betrayals, forgotten promises, but nothing that seemed severe enough to warrant this kind of reaction. The next morning, I decided to confront Sarah again. She had been supportive, and her insight might help me understand the deeper meaning behind the letters. We met for coffee at a quaint cafe, and as we settled into our seats, I noticed her worried expression. "Sarah, I've been getting these letters with increasingly disturbing content," I said, sliding the latest letter across the table. They're referencing events from my past that I don't fully understand. Sarah read the letter, her brows knitting together. This is intense, Anna. It sounds like someone is holding a grudge or wants to make you suffer for something you did. I keep thinking about past mistakes, I admitted, but nothing seems severe enough to warrant this. I can't figure out why someone would target me so personally. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Could it be something from your past that you might have forgotten or dismissed? Sometimes, people hold on to grievances for a long time. Maybe there's something significant that you're overlooking. Her words struck a chord, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something crucial I was missing. I returned home with a heavy heart, determined to dig deeper into my past. I rifled through old journals, letters, and photographs, trying to uncover any clue that might explain why someone would harbor such intense animosity. As I sifted through old memories and documents, the weight of my search became almost unbearable. The more I delved into my past, the more I uncovered minor incidents and forgotten promises, but none seemed to fit the severity of the threats I was facing. One evening, while going through a box of old family photographs, I stumbled upon an old journal from my college days. The entries were filled with youthful musings, friendships, and fleeting romances. As I flipped through the pages, one entry caught my eye. It was about a person from my past, someone I had wronged in a way I had long since buried. The entry described a friend named David, someone I had once been close to but had lost touch with after a falling out. David had been a good friend during a turbulent time in my life, but we had a dramatic disagreement over something trivial, which had ultimately ended our friendship. I remembered it as an unfortunate but unremarkable parting of ways. The journal entry, however, revealed that the fallout had been more significant than I had realized. I read further, realizing that David had been hurt deeply by our falling out. My youthful arrogance and dismissiveness had left him feeling betrayed. It was clear from the journal that I had been insensitive and callous, but I had never thought it would have a lasting impact. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I connected the dots. David was the same person from my past who might now be tormenting me through these letters. The realization hit me with full force. David could be the one behind the anonymous correspondence, seeking revenge for the pain I had caused him. I needed to know for sure. I reached out to a few mutual acquaintances, trying to trace David's whereabouts. It took a while, but I finally managed to find a contact who had last heard from him years ago. They confirmed that David had been living in the area, but details about his current situation were sketchy. Determined to confront my past, I decided to try and find David. If he was indeed the person behind the letters, I needed to face him and seek some kind of resolution. The idea of confronting him was both terrifying and relieving. At least I would have answers, even if they were painful. As I prepared for the search, the weight of my past mistakes bore heavily on me. I thought about David and the hurt I had caused him. The letters, though frightening, were starting to make sense as a twisted form of retribution. I knew that finding him was the only way to bring closure to this nightmarish chapter of my life. I set out with a mix of dread and resolve, determined to face the echoes of my past, whatever they might bring. My determination to find David was driven by a potent mixture of guilt and fear. I was desperate to understand whether he was behind the letters and, if so, what he wanted from me. As I embarked on my search, my heart raced with each step, knowing that confronting David might bring the closure I desperately needed, or it might open a door to even greater danger. I started by visiting places I thought he might frequent: old haunts, favorite cafes, and community centers. Each visit was an emotional trial, filled with a growing sense of dread and a gnawing worry about what I would find. Most people I spoke to had not seen David in years, and the few who had seemed to offer vague recollections or unhelpful information. One afternoon, I found myself in a quiet park, sitting on a bench and reflecting on how far I had come. I noticed a man sitting at a nearby table, engrossed in a book. Something about him struck me as familiar, though I couldn't place it. I watched him for a while, trying to gather my courage to approach him. The man had an air of detachment and solitude that reminded me of David. Taking a deep breath, I walked over and introduced myself. "Excuse me, I hope I'm not intruding. I'm looking for someone named David Turner. I heard he might have frequented this park." The man looked up, his eyes narrowing in thought. "David Turner, you say? I knew a David back in the day, but he was a different person then. He used to come here a lot, but I haven't seen him in years. I think he moved away or something. My heart sank a little. Do you know where he might have gone? He shook his head. Sorry, can't help you much there. He left suddenly. It was a rough time for him. I thanked him and walked away, feeling increasingly despondent. It was clear that finding David would be no easy task. My next step was to dig deeper into old records and try to find any trace of him online. I spent hours researching, going through social media profiles, old university alumni lists, and local directories. One night, while scrolling through an old forum for college alumni, I stumbled upon a thread where someone had mentioned David in passing. The post was from someone who had been a classmate of ours, and it mentioned that David had left town after a series of personal troubles. The poster mentioned a city not too far from where I lived, hinting that David had moved there. I took note of the city's name and made plans to visit. The hope of finding David was now intertwined with a palpable sense of trepidation. I knew that if David was indeed the sender of the letters, I would have to confront the very person I had wronged years ago. I was unsure of how he would react, but I needed to face my past head-on. After days of searching, I finally arrived in the city where David was rumored to have relocated. It was a place that felt both familiar and alien, like stepping into a new chapter of an old story. I checked into a modest hotel, determined to find David and, hopefully, get some answers. The following morning, I began my search in earnest. I visited local libraries and community centers, trying to gather any information on David's whereabouts. My efforts were met with mixed results. Some people remembered him, but few had any recent updates on his life. By late afternoon, I decided to follow up on a lead that pointed to a small art studio. David had always been passionate about painting, and the studio was said to be a place where he had occasionally exhibited his work. As I approached the studio, my heart pounded with anxiety. The studio was located in a quiet, artsy district. It had a welcoming exterior, with paintings displayed in the windows. I walked inside, where the scent of turpentine and oil paints filled the air. A young woman at the counter greeted me with a warm smile. "Hello, I'm looking for David Turner. I was told he might be associated with this studio," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The woman's smile faded slightly as she regarded me with curiosity. "David Turner? He used to be here often, but he's not around much these days. He had some personal issues and left town about a year ago." A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. "Do you know where he went? Is there any way I can contact him?" She hesitated, then reached under the counter and handed me a small card. "I'm not sure if this will help, but David used to keep his contact details on this card for his closest friends. It's an old contact number and an address. I hope it's still valid." I took the card, my hands shaking. The address was for a small apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. I thanked her and set out for the address, each step feeling heavier with the anticipation of what I might find. The apartment complex was old and worn, but it had a certain charm. I found the apartment number listed on the card and knocked on the door, my heart racing. After a few moments, the door creaked open, revealing a man who looked both familiar and older. "David." His eyes widened in surprise as he saw me. "Anna, what are you doing here?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "David, I've been receiving these letters. They've been extremely personal and frightening. I believe you might be behind them." David's expression hardened. "I see. I wasn't sure if you'd come. I didn't expect you to actually find me." I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. "I need to understand why you're doing this. What have I done to deserve this?" David's gaze softened slightly as he invited me inside. The apartment was sparsely decorated, with a few paintings and sketches scattered around. We sat down, and David began to speak. "You probably don't remember, but when we fell out, it wasn't just a simple disagreement. You dismissed me and our friendship in a way that left me devastated. It wasn't just about the argument, it was about how you treated me, how you made me feel like I was worthless." I listened, my heart heavy with guilt. "David, I had no idea my actions affected you so deeply. I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused. But why the letters? Why torment me like this?" David's face grew somber. The letters were my way of making you understand what it felt like to be violated, to have your private moments exposed. I wanted you to feel a fraction of the fear and vulnerability that I felt. I could see the depth of his pain, but I also realized the danger and cruelty of his actions. David, I understand that you were hurt, but this isn't the way to handle it. We need to find a way to resolve this without causing more harm. David's eyes were filled with a mixture of sadness and anger. I don't know if I can just forgive and forget. The pain runs too deep. I took a deep breath, knowing that I had to try and make things right. I want to make amends. Let's find a way to move past this and heal. David remained silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. Perhaps we can start by talking and working through this. But it won't be easy. As we began to discuss our past and the possibility of reconciliation, I felt a glimmer of hope. Though the road ahead was uncertain, the confrontation had opened a door to healing, and perhaps it would lead to an end to the torment that had plagued my life. The days following my confrontation with David were filled with a fragile sense of hope. We had agreed to meet regularly to work through our past grievances, and David seemed open to finding some form of closure. It was a delicate process, but I believed it was the right path toward healing. However, as the weeks went by, the letters did not stop. In fact, they became even more unnervingly personal. They began to include details about my daily interactions with David, moments we shared, and even my attempts to make amends. The frequency and intensity of the letters made me question whether David was truly behind them or if there was someone else at play. One evening, after a particularly harrowing letter arrived, I decided to confront David once more. I visited his apartment, my anxiety mounting with each step. When he answered the door, I could see the weariness in his eyes. David, the letters, they're getting worse, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. If it's not you, then who is it? I need to know. David's face was a mask of frustration and sadness. Anna, I swear I haven't sent those. I don't know who else could be doing this. Maybe there's someone else who wants to cause more pain, or maybe it's a way to keep the past alive and unsettled. As we spoke, I noticed a pattern emerging from David's words. The letters seemed to be a continuous attempt to unsettle me, to keep me in a state of emotional turmoil. I began to wonder if the true orchestrator was someone who had an even deeper connection to my past, a person who might have known both David and me. I decided to take a step back and reassess everything from a fresh perspective. The letters had become increasingly detailed and sophisticated, indicating a level of knowledge that seemed almost intimate. The idea that someone was orchestrating this elaborate scheme was both disturbing and illuminating. On a sleepless night, I sat in my apartment, going through all the letters again. Something caught my eye, a recurring motif, a peculiar reference that had been subtly embedded in the letters. It was a phrase that had once been used by someone very close to me, someone I had completely forgotten about. My husband, Jack. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. Could Jack be the mastermind behind this elaborate deception? It seemed inconceivable, but the signs were there. Jack had always been meticulous and detail-oriented, traits that could explain the sophistication of the letters. The idea that Jack might be manipulating me from behind the scenes was both horrifying and a revelation I could barely comprehend. The next morning, with my mind racing and heart pounding, I knew I had to confront Jack. I couldn't ignore the unsettling possibility that he was behind the letters. If my suspicions were correct, it meant that everything I had experienced, the fear, the paranoia, the confrontation with David, had been part of a twisted game orchestrated by the person I trusted most. Jack was away at work, so I had some time to prepare. I went through all the letters one last time, comparing the handwriting and the patterns. There was no conclusive proof, but the emotional and psychological manipulation hinted at someone who knew me deeply, someone who was intimately involved in every aspect of my life. When Jack came home that evening, I was waiting for him. I tried to stay calm, but the tension was palpable. As he walked through the door, I could see the weariness in his eyes, mirroring my own. Jack, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady but firm. I've been going through the letters again, and there's something I need to ask you. Jack looked at me, his expression shifting from concern to confusion. What's this about? What's going on? I took a deep breath. I've come to suspect that you might be behind the letters. The details, the personal nature, it all points to someone who knows me intimately. Is it true? Jack's face turned pale, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, guilt, fear, or perhaps a hidden truth. He sat down heavily, his shoulders slumping. Anna, I didn't want to hurt you. I was trying to make you understand something important. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and confusion. Jack's voice was barely a whisper. I wanted you to face the consequences of your actions from the past. I was trying to make you see how much you hurt David, how your past decisions have repercussions. I didn't know it would get so out of hand. It was supposed to be a lesson, not a punishment. The revelation was both shocking and deeply unsettling. Jack had orchestrated the entire scheme to teach me a lesson about my past mistakes. His methods were cruel and manipulative, designed to make me suffer as a form of twisted justice. But why, Jack? Why go to such extremes? I demanded, tears welling up in my eyes. Why involve David and put me through all this torment? Jack's eyes were filled with a mixture of regret and sorrow. I thought if you experienced the fear and vulnerability of having your private life exposed, you'd understand the depth of the pain you caused David. I didn't realize how much it would affect you, or how far I would go. The weight of Jack's confession was overwhelming. I felt a deep sense of betrayal and heartbreak. The person I had trusted and loved had turned out to be the architect of my suffering. The emotional toll was immense, and I knew that our relationship could never be the same. To end the days that followed, I took time to process everything. The betrayal had left me reeling, but it also gave me clarity about the future. I realized that healing from the emotional scars required confronting the painful truths and finding a way to move forward. David and I began to rebuild our fractured friendship, albeit with a new understanding of our past. The letters had served as a catalyst for addressing old wounds and finding a path to reconciliation. As for Jack, our relationship was irrevocably changed. The trust that had been broken was something that couldn't be easily repaired. Ultimately, the experience had taught me about the complexities of human relationships, the consequences of our actions, and the importance of facing the truth even when it's painful. The journey was far from over, but I had taken the first step toward healing and understanding, no matter how arduous the path might be.